Holy cow, in this video we're going to be taking a dive into, I guess, Cinderbrew Meadery, talking about the routing, the mobs to look out for, mostly for week 1. Again, this is what I would consider a pug route. It's going to be very early. There might be adaptations later on. Now, I will say that this dungeon is very linear, and there isn't much opportunity for skipping for pug groups based on composition. So you're probably maybe going to go over a little bit on percent here, but it's not a big deal because, again, it's very linear, not much you can do about it. Anyways, starting off the dungeon, the big thing to note about the first room are these hired muscles. You never want to pull more of one of these at a time. They are very lethal. One other thing is there is a mini boss, Chef Chewy, patrolling the room. Any mobs within his, I guess, radius, within 15 yards of him, will have a complement of the Chef buff, which makes them immune to CC and they deal more damage. So don't pull hired muscles together, and don't pull higher muscles with Chef Chewy. You're gonna wipe. So I like to start off the dungeon by pulling off to the right hand side because Chef Chewy is up to the north end of the dungeon or on the left side of the room, and he's gonna eventually patrol down here where you can tackle him by himself or with a little bit more tame mobs. One other thing you'll note in here is that there's a lot of like yellow mobs that aren't gonna count for percent, and they're not gonna be an MDT. So this room is gonna look less or more hectic in game than it does in here. But basically, I like to pull this pack of patrons and the pyromaniac and this hired muscle on the far right side of the room. And if this attendant is in a good spot, might as well bring them in to cleave them down. This is going to make good use of heroism if you'd like. It also is a very good use of big cooldowns. The focus here is hired muscle. The big scary thing here is he does his volatile keg. This does a lot of group damage and applies a dot to everyone. Tanks, you're going to want to look out for these patrons. They do mean mug, which is a stacking bleed effect that can be very lethal in high keys. Actually, kind of cool. The ringing mud ritual trinket from Floodgate is also very good in here because it constantly gets cooldown reduction based on this bleed. So very good. But basically, that's kind of the note of this pull. What I like to do next is I like to then clear a little bit of the right side of the room by pulling these packs here, and then eventually Chef Chewy will make his way over and he'll be available to pull. Once he goes down, I would then recommend pulling the hired muscle with this pack to the right, and then you're going to finish it up by pulling these 3 packs here if they want to highlight. So this pull is this room is a little bit more subjective for most groups. It really depends on patrol timings of the attendants of Chef Chewy. The only thing I will note about this first room is you don't need to pull this corner pack. You can if you want to, but just know you'll go over percent, and you will never go to this deep corner later in the fight. The reason why we're clearing the rest of this trash is because you need to use this space during Brewmaster Fuck, dude, I just butchered that. We'll leave it in. Fuck it. Boss guides I've already done. If you're interested in seeing quick explanations of bosses, feel free to look down below. If you want more detailed boss explanations and how to do them and strategies for tanks specifically, feel free to subscribe. I'll probably do them in the near future. Anyways, once you kill the first boss, I personally recommend, for less timings, going to the north end of the dungeon to fight IPA. Now, this dungeon is a little bit more open-ended. While it is linear, you can go also to Bank Busby next. But with less timings, I prefer going up to IPA to get this boss out of the way. So this area of the dungeon is very dangerous. I don't recommend pulling more than 1 pack at a time. Now, some people will disagree with this, but I think in a pug environment, especially early on in the season when not a lot of people know what's going on, don't overpull in this dungeon. Basically, the big things you're going to be looking out for here are the pyromaniacs doing their channel of boiling flames on players. You also have the flavor scientist who's going to cast rejuvenating honey, which heals mobs. Make sure you're kicking this. You then have this careless hop goblin. These guys are going to do this thing called reckless charge, which is going to, or reckless delivery. They're going to face a random party member and they're going to charge in their direction. This does a high burst of AoE damage. It also will knock players up that get hit. And when the damage that's being done won't happen until they connect with a wall. So you can control kind of when this will deal damage. But if a player faces it in the wrong direction and they run, they're going to pull extra stuff. So DPS and tanks or healers, whoever gets targeted, try to face it into a nearby wall and use it offensive. Whenever they do hit a wall and when they die, they spawn more ads, which don't count for percent and just are kind of annoying. The last things in here are the taste testers that do free samples and spill drink. Kick these when you can, soothe them when you can. They basically make them do more damage and stuff. But basically, that's all of the trash that's in this area. So you're just going to keep pulling 1 pack at a time. Now, when you get to the boss room, the one thing I recommend doing here is, if you can, is stay back in the hallway and pull the first pack out. There are 2 patrols, and mobs kind of go all over the place. It's very easy to accidentally pull too much in here and wipe, and if you wipe in this dungeon, the run back is the start of the dungeon, so it's very long. So the first pull that's in here, and this Careless Hobgoblin to the right-hand side when you enter the room, is what you should pull out of the room. Once you do that, you can do this pack here. Wow, voice crack. You can do this pack here. Then you can pull the boss area, and then you can clear this corner pack as well. The reason I'm pulling this corner pack before the boss is that there is a little boss spawning RP, and you can just make efficient use of your time here. Then you'll do IPA, and then you'll be able to move on to the south end of the dungeon. This area is a little bit more tame in terms of group damage. You can generally pull bigger. It's not as lethal. You'll generally pull the first 3 packs. Tanks, the worker bees do this thing called Final Sting, which is like an execution, and then they'll die when they do this cast, but it does a ton of tank damage. So when you start seeing these Final Sting casts, be very careful. The bee wranglers will try to bolster and buff the pets, or they're the bees in this dungeon, and they're going to do something called Bazooka. This will target a random player in a frontal line. Obviously, other DPS don't stand in this. The player being targeted should stand still. The honey harvesters, they really just do this like giant circle on the ground. Just don't be in it. This isn't really problematic. It's easy to dodge until you start pulling in things like the purveyors. These guys do a thing called honey volley, which slows players by like 70%. You can remove this with, snare removals, but it can come at a bad time with the honey harvesters circle that you want to dodge, and it can be lethal. Next, you're going to want to pull the purveyor plus these corner guys, and you can bring in a harvester if you really want to. And then the rest of this hallway, you can kind of just do 1 pack at a time. You can double it up if you're feeling safe. The general rule of thumb is I don't like to pull more than 2 purveyors at a time, and but that's pretty much it. If you can get around pulling 2 purveyors at a time, you're going to be generally safe in here. Again, coordinated groups, you'll have an easy time kicking mobs. It's fine if you want to like triple or quadruple pull this entire hallway. Tanks, again, just be very careful of these worker bees. Going into this next area, you're going to be swarmed by beelets. They're going to do the same thing. They're going to do that final sting. Tanks are going to be very scared on this pull. But basically, oh, this got out of order. All you're doing is pulling 1 pack at a time. You can skip around this purveyor here and jump right into the boss room. Just be very careful because these guys kind of wander a little bit, so it's easy to body pull them on accident. If you can avoid this pack, great. If you can't avoid it, it's fine. You're just going to go over percent a little bit. Next, you're going to want to pull most of this area, and you'll be chilling. You'll do the boss, and you can also pull these beelets on the boss if you really want to. And now with 1% remaining, you're ready to head up to the final boss room. This pull, surprisingly, is only worth like 1%, 2%. So this pull feels very inefficient, but you have to do it. Like I said before, if you do end up pulling this pack here, you're going to be over percent by about 2. It's not the end of the world, but it's definitely not. It's something you want to and can avoid, so just be careful. And that's pretty much the dungeon. I hope this makes sense. It is a pretty whole W. You can be a little bit more efficient by making sure you're not pulling every single pack in a boss room or near a boss room. If you can get away with doing that, you'll be fine. If you accidentally pull it, don't stress it. The timer in here isn't crazy tight until you start getting to the highest level of keys. It's a pretty fun dungeon. I think most DPS players will enjoy their time in here. Healers and tanks, you're probably going to hate this dungeon. Anyways, I hope this makes sense. If you have any questions, leave them down below. I'll try to answer them. You can also always join my Discord, which has boss guide information. You can always communicate with me in there as well. And there's just a bunch of other little goodies. Anyways, I hope you're all staying happy, healthy, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.